Alrighty, it's time for another News of the Week episode, and unlike the last couple of News of the Week episode where I have to switch the board one more time and put the remaining news on the board, I don't have to do that for this week because I was able to put all the news that I'm going to talk about in this News of the Week episode into one board, which I'm definitely happy about that, consider that is definitely much less of a hassle to basically have to erase this whole board and put the remaining news on the board compared to me just putting all the news that is into one board. But we start off with this News of the Week episode by talking about a surprising retirement that have just announced today, and that is Luis Robles has announced his retirement after a 14-year playing career where he spent his first half of his 14-year playing career in Europe and playing in the second division of the Bundesliga before coming back to the US in 2012. Play with the Red Bulls pretty much throughout his entire MLS career until last year, where he of course was joining with Inter Miami. And what's kind of surprising, the fact that he decided to announce his retirement now, is that it feels like he could have at least have 2 or 3 more years left in the tank before he even thinking about hanging up his boots. I mean, I understand that he did suffer a nasty arm injury where unfortunately he broke his arm that kept him out for the rest of the season. And when you're a goalkeeper trying to come back from a broken arm, that is definitely not an easy injury to try to come back. But I thought that he would come back stronger heading into next season. And again, could have had at least 2 or 3 years left in the tank, and that knowing the fact that we have already seen legendary goalkeeper with the likes of Nick Raimondo that kind of play until he's 40 years old before he hang up his boots. I thought Robles could have done the same thing, and he could have probably played until he's like 39 or 40 years old. But it doesn't seem like that is going to happen, as he, of course, announced his retirement today. But nevertheless, what a career it has been for Luis Robles. And, talk about how the players that got snubbed in terms of on the list of the 25 greatest MLS player, Luis Robles is probably another player that got snubbed on that list. I mean, I understand that he played pretty much his first half of his career in Europe, and he didn't start playing in MLS until his 7 years, until his second half of his career. But when you look at that list, and there's some players that not only have spent not just half of their career in MLS, but some of them only spent like a short amount of period when they of their career in MLS before they do eventually move on to play in Europe. And I thought if that's the case, you might as well just add Luis Robles onto the list. And especially when he did sign with the Red Bulls back in 2012, he didn't miss a single start for the Red Bulls until in the 2019 season, and he went like 160 plus games without missing a start for the Red Bulls, and that some people even call that he is pretty much the Iron Man of MLS and probably the Iron Man of goalkeeper. And you could also even say that if he did start his entire career in MLS, he could have really challenged Nick Raimondo in terms of the record of the all-time appearance list for goalkeeper in MLS history. But yeah, congratulations to Luis Robles, the fact that he of course finally announced his retirement. Well, I wouldn't say congratulations, but I would probably maybe say best of wishes of what he's going to do after his career. I'm assuming he's probably going to be going into a coaching role, because besides the fact that he's such a great goalkeeper, especially during his time with the Red Bulls, but he was the captain of that team, and the leadership that he has with that team is definitely immense, and that it's something that I think he could definitely take, maybe getting a coaching role later in his career. But we shall see what he's going to do after his career. And also, I will do a career video about Luis Robles, just like the one that I, of course, did with Kyle Beckerman. Even though this one is going to be a little bit more interesting with the way that, unlike Beckerman, with me talk about his entire career being in MLS, I will, of course, talk about his career during his first half of the season, where, again, he spent his first half of his career when he was playing in Europe before he does come back to the US and play for the Red Bulls starting in the 2012 season. Now, moving on in terms of the next news and talk about coaching news from this week. Well, it seemed like there is now a new candidate that has emerged in the DC United head coaching search, and the new candidate is Alexander Zonrig. I think that's how you pronounce it. And he basically has all just kind of came out of nowhere, emerged as the new candidate for the DC United head coaching search, and that this is a guy that he actually was with Bromby before he, I believe, was fired last season. But before his time being the head coach of Bromby, he's been spending most time coaching in the lower leagues of the Bundesliga, and that it's kind of interesting that this just kind of, again, it really kind of came out of nowhere that now he has been thrown in the hat of potentially being the next head coach for DC United. But I'm pretty much assume that DC is probably going to nail down in terms of their original list of candidate of coaching search that they of course announced a couple of weeks ago. And that, I know some people also say, well, aren't DC United eventually going to announce their next head coach? I mean, didn't they also said that they were going to announce it before the new year? I understand that probably didn't really come true, but at the end of the day, I think DC is going to be very careful in terms of who they want to choose as their head coach, and that it's very important for teams to get this head coaching role right, because we know that in this league nowadays, you of course need to have good players to feel a competitive team, but you also need to have a good head coach, and a coach that was able to use the tactics to get the best out of those good players to be a competitive team. And I guess DC is trying to narrow that down, and eventually I think they are going to announce who is going to be their next head coach of this team. Now, speaking of head coach, the Seattle Sounders have reported that they have reached a contract agreement with head coach Brian Schmetzer, and I think this shouldn't be a big surprise, in that I think it's just a matter of days before they make the announcement official that they have reached a contract agreement with Brian Schmetzer. I mean, I even said I was kind of surprised that it has taken this long for the Sounders to basically reach an agreement for their current head coach, and that I would have been shocked if the Sounders was not going to bring back Brian Schmetzer heading into next season. But it seemed like that is not going to be the case, and that, again, it's just going to be a matter of days before they finally reach a contract agreement. Now, moving away in terms of talk about coaching news to kind of talk about signings that has happened. And once again, we're going to start with Austin FC, who continue to be very busy in terms of the free agency market and also signing player off of free agency, as this week they have signed Matt Besler and Diego Fagundez off free agency. And I don't want to say I told you guys so when I talk about how Matt Besler, when he decided to not come back to Sporting KC, that Austin FC is probably his location. But I kind of told you guys so. I mean, it makes perfect sense why Besler was going to go to Austin FC, and knowing the fact that when you look at these past couple of expansion team, and what is the one key things that these past expansion team have tried to do in terms of signing defender, they look to try to go into the free agency market and pick a guy that is known to be a very decent defender that was in the free agency market. And certainly Besler was probably the top of the list in terms of the best defender on that free agency market, and it was no surprise that Austin FC decided to snatch him up before anybody even think about trying to snatch him off. And then, of course, Diego Fagundez. I mean, you talk about a guy that clearly needs a change of scenery. Fagundez is clearly one of them. I mean, I know he is very beloved in the New England Revolution fan base, and that I'm pretty sure he really wants to stay with the Revs, but you can pretty much tell that his time with the Revs was definitely number when he is pretty much dropping down the pecking order in terms of the depth chart of the team, and that this is a guy that I think he's just too good to be basically being stuck on the bench for a decent team, and that maybe he needs a change of scenery to trying to rediscover the good form that he had for the past couple, or the good form that he had just a couple of years ago. And I think with him going to Austin FC is going to be the way for him to finally get some starting minutes and really get himself back into a good form that, as I said, he had a couple of years ago. Now, moving on in terms of the next news, is DC United is now apparently rumored to be in negotiation with Mesut Ozil, and again, this is another one of those kind of news, just like the Messi rumor to MLS, where I'm reluctant to believe that this rumor is actually have some truth behind it, and the fact that we have heard the story before that Mesut Ozil was going to be coming to MLS and DC might be the prime destination to do it, and the fact that we're once again hearing this rumor, despite the fact that we heard this rumor a couple of years ago and it didn't quite work out, it just makes me believe that this is just nothing but just kind of maybe excite the DC United fan base a little bit, that they might have got another big name European player, but it turns out that of course is not the case. And also, if Ozil does come to MLS, I'm assuming if a team is going to sign him, they're going to have to give him a lot of money. I mean, this is a guy that he's pretty much sitting on a £350,000 contract with Arsenal, and that I know he's definitely want to potentially leave the team and trying to get a change of scenery and a fresh start in MLS. But in order to do that, you need to of course give him a very big contract, and something that maybe could be an 8-figure contract, and maybe the first player we ever seen in league history to earn an 8-figure contract in terms of per year basis. So if DC is going to potentially sign Ozil, they're going to really have to reach into their pocket and really give even more money than when they decided to sign Wayne Rooney just a couple of years ago. And then I know there's also some people that is a little bit skeptical of the fact that, you know, since Ozil, his form has really declined in the past couple of years, you know, is this going to fit well with DC United? Is he going to be a player that is going to come there and actually revolutionize the attack? Well, we probably will find out if they eventually get this signing over the line, and that we'll see whether or not if he's going to be kind of like what DC United got for Wayne Rooney, where remember when Wayne Rooney was another player that a lot of people questioned whether he coming to MLS really actually will help him rediscover his good form that he had during the peak of his power with Manchester United? And the answer is yes. He turns out to be an amazing player for DC, and I'm pretty sure DC is hoping Mesut Ozil will kind of do the same thing if they eventually sign him on a permanent base. Now, moving on, in terms of the next news is Atlanta United. And speaking of Manchester United, Atlanta is linked with a Manchester United target and linked with an Ecuadorian midfielder, Moses Caicedo. And unsurprisingly, this is a guy that is currently playing in Argentina, and this is kind of a very Atlanta kind of signing if they do get this one done, where once again they're going down to South America, looking for these hidden gems in South America and trying to bring them and then develop them before selling them off for a profit. And you know that if you're trying to sign a guy that is linked with one of the best club in the world, you know that it is probably a very high potential talent. But that being said, if Atlanta eventually are going to maybe get Caicedo to their team, they're going to have to pay a lot of money for it, and probably even an 8-figure to trying to get Caicedo to their team, because I know Manchester United is going to offer big money, and if you're going to try to outbid Man United for a player, you better bring your pocket gets in. You better spend a lot of money in order to outbid them, because United is another team that has probably one of the deepest pockets in terms of every single team in the world. And I think Atlanta, again, if they're going to sign Caicedo, which again, it's going to be probably a DP contract, which means that most likely they're going to maybe have to think about moving one of their DP and buying one of their DP player down, because I think they also have used up all their DP spot. And I've also have heard there's rumor that player that they potentially are going to buy down in terms of the DP contract is Marcelino Moreno, and that they can of course sign Caicedo on a designated player contract. But we shall see whether or not if this is going to happen. And if you're Moses Caicedo, this is definitely an interesting decision for him, because on one hand, you got a team that has a history of bringing talented young South American player and eventually sell them off to Europe. But then you also got probably a chance to play in a team that I'm pretty sure a lot of players would love to dream to play for during their career. So it's gonna be an interesting choice of what do he decided to choose the lucrative deal and go to Europe to join one of the best team in the world, or the fact that he decided to get minutes and continue to develop his career with Atlanta before maybe even getting another shot of joining another big name kind of team in Europe in a couple of years. Now, speaking of big name player and big name South American player that are looking to try to make the jump to Europe, is Tristan Pavone, who, remember a couple of years ago, he was on the brinks of potentially going to Europe, and Arsenal was a team that he was linked to basically going to join. Well, nowadays, it seemed like he is now in this dilemma and kind of in this saga where is he going to be staying with the Galaxy, or is he actually going to be rejoining with Boca Junior? And the latest update in terms of the Pavone saga is that he's now training with Boca Junior and was left out in the Boca Junior Copa Libertadores squad. And what's interesting about this is that I think in the last News of the Week episode, I talked about how Pavone, he was still in Boca Junior was still in contact with the Galaxy, and it's still in a negotiation with whether or not if the Galaxy are going to sign Pavone on a permanent deal, or the fact that they're going to have another loan deal for him. Well, it seemed like there was no agreement reached, and that January 1st was kind of almost the deadline where if they don't get the negotiation done, then Pavone basically have to go back to Boca Junior, which I'm assuming he basically are now back at Boca Junior. But what's now even more fascinating is that he's not training with Boca Junior and not even in their squad. So it's like, well, does that mean that he is still in negotiation with the Galaxy? I mean, I'm assuming most likely that is the case, where Boca knows that his future with the team still is up in the air, despite the fact that period where they said that if they don't come with a negotiation with the Galaxy by the new year, that means they're going to basically get him back, and the loan deal for that the Galaxy had on Pavone pretty much just come into an expire. But that doesn't seem like it is the case, and that again, the longer this continues, I feel like there is a case that most likely Pavone is going to be staying with the Galaxy, and that again, I'm not sure how much are they going to pay for him if they're going to be on a permanent base. The last time I heard was $20 million, but with how long this negotiation has done, maybe that price have been driven down a lot, and maybe the Galaxy might get a deal from Boca Junior where they can and still have to maybe pay eight-figure to get him on a permanent base, but not as much as what was the original price tag, which was $20 million, which Boca Junior basically said that they need to pay to them in order to sign him on a permanent basis. Now, moving on in terms of the next rumor, there is reports suggest that there's an Eastern Conference team that is making an offer for DeAndre Yedlin, and DeAndre Yedlin is another player that's been, for the past couple of years, been linked with a move to MLS. And from what I've seen, the pattern with these rumors where past MLS players that make the jump to Europe, but eventually they're going to come back to MLS, that eventually that move is going to happen. So there's no doubt that I think DeAndre Yedlin eventually is going to be coming back to MLS, but I'm kind of surprised that he's been rumored with an Eastern Conference team, and that I thought if there was a team that probably is going to get him back, and that they're going to potentially get him back to MLS is the Seattle Sounders, because he basically started his career with the Sounders before he does make the jump to Europe, and now it looks like he is coming back to MLS. It makes perfect sense, the fact that the Sounders we reunited with DeAndre Yedlin, but I guess maybe that might not be the case with the way that there's a lot of team in the Eastern Conference that is making an offer for him. And also keep in mind, for if you want to potentially sign DeAndre Yedlin, you need to, of course, try to get in the top allocation order. And, when I look at the top allocation order, I think Austin currently is at the top of the allocation order because, expansion team, they usually get the dips in terms of the allocation order. So maybe if you are an Eastern Conference team that is trying to get DeAndre Yedlin, you got to probably talk to Austin FC and give them something for them in order to take that top allocation order away for them. So yeah, we shall see who exactly is going to be that team that eventually is going to win the DeAndre Yedlin sweepstake. But moving on, in terms of the next news, is that former Huddersfield goalkeeper Jonas is linked with a move to Inter Miami, and I can definitely see this move happen, especially with today's announcement that Luis Robles was not going to be coming back to Inter Miami because he decided to announce his retirement. Inter Miami all of a sudden are scrambling in terms of finding a starting goalkeeper. And I'm not saying McCarthy is not worthy of a starting goalkeeper role, and I think maybe Inter Miami might give him a chance to maybe be their starters, but they're definitely looking to trying to find a replacement for Robles. And I think Lossi is a decent replacement for him because I remember when he was with Huddersfield, and back when Huddersfield was in the Premier League in I believe the 2017-2018 and then the 2018 and 19 season, he was definitely a very good goalkeeper with that team, and I think this would definitely be a good move for Inter Miami to make, and especially again with the announcement of Luis Robles retiring today, it's most likely that this move is going to happen. Now, one move that could potentially also happen is FC Cincinnati has officially submitted an offer for Flamengo striker Lincoln, and there was a report just a couple of days ago that they were linked with this player, although there was some heavy competition in terms of a lot of teams trying to get this player away from Flamengo. And this is kind of an interesting one with the way that FC Cincinnati, they're looking to now try to do a method that a lot of teams, and especially kind of the formula that Atlanta United kind of all started with, going down to South America and looking for these young hidden gems. And for this guy Lincoln, I don't know much about this guy other than the fact that he of course made about 30 plus appearance with this team, but only scored 4 goals during that time. But he's also only 20 years old when he was with Flamengo during this time, and that again, I've also heard that he hasn't renewed his contract with Flamengo, and most likely he's not going to be coming back with this team. So yeah, there's no surprise that a lot of teams are trying to get him, and that for FC Cincinnati, they're really hoping that eventually if they do win the bid to try to get him to their team, that this will finally solve the biggest issue, or at least one of their biggest issue that they've been having in the past couple of years. I mean, FC Cincinnati has been having a ton of issue in terms of building their squad in the past couple of years. But if they can get a striker that is able to score goals and able to maybe banging let's I wouldn't even say like 15 goals, but at least get into close to the double digit mark. I think that would be a good start and a good foundation piece for a team that is desperate in terms of finding players that can definitely fit into just being a good MLS player, and being a player that can really help a team get out of what has just been the basement of MLS for the past couple of years. And then finally, the last news that I'm going to talk about is the U.S. men's national team have called up 12 MLS players that will be part of the senior roster in the January camp. So the January camp for the U.S. men's national team this year is going to be a little bit interesting, where it's pretty much just filled with U23 roster, where those are the players that are ready to be part of the Olympic qualifier and are looking to try to qualify for the Olympic heading into 2021. But there's also going to be some senior roster out of that, and that there's going to be 12 MLS players that is going to be part of the senior roster. And I'm going to actually pull up the list of those players that is is part of the January camp as the senior roster. Actually, I'm just going to use my phone to look this up because it's much faster than me searching it on my laptop that I am recording this video. So let's take a look here. Let's see. Okay, here it is. So the 12 players are going to be Sean Johnson and Matt Turner in the goalkeeper position, and then in the defensive position we got Tristan Blackman, Aaron Long, Walker Zimmerman. In the midfield we got Kellen Acosta, Sebastian Lletget, and Christian Rodon. And then they also are going to put 4 striker and 4 forward into their team in Josie Altidore, Paul Arriola, Jordan Morris, and Chris Mueller. So that's kind of an interesting kind of list. We had a couple of first-timers in terms of being called up for the U.S. men's national team. Matt Turner, I am actually so happy that he finally gets his chance with the U.S. men's national team, especially the breakout year that he had last season with the Revs. I feel like he definitely deserved. Tristan Blackman, another first-time player that is called up for the U.S. men's national team. Josie Altidore is an interesting kind of name, knowing the fact that I've thought, his career with the U.S. men's national team was pretty much going to come to an end with the age that he is in. But I guess maybe the U.S. wants to have a guy that is an experienced player and a player that's been with the national team for a very long time. So I guess maybe the reason why they decided to call him up is just for the experience part and trying to give these young guys some advice of how to potentially break into the national team. And again, there's a lot of U23 players that is on the roster for the January camp, and a lot of these players, they're definitely going to be fighting for spots in terms of potentially making the jump into their senior roster. And especially when you look at the U.S. men's national team and how deep that senior roster is and how it's filled with a lot of talented players. These players on the January camp, there's not going to be as much spot as we have seen in previous year where they are able to eventually make the breakthrough and get their spots, of maybe even be on the World Cup qualifying team heading into this year. So we shall see how these guys is going to do, and that during this January camp, I'm assuming they're also going to be playing a couple of friendlies during that point, which I'm thinking whether or not should I, of course, watch these friendly match, considering the fact that for me, when I look at the U.S. men's national team, I'm still kind of in a kind of broken relationship with the national team, with how incompetent that the soccer federation that is running the national team has been. But with the way that when I look at the roster and when you look at the bright future that this team has, that broken relationship is starting to kind of repair, and that I am started to just slightly believe in the national team again, and maybe they can, of course, do good things. Now, obviously, that can all change when we get into the World Cup qualifying and maybe even getting into the Gold Cup period. And actually, I would say the World Cup qualifying is more important than the Gold Cup, because especially what happened last time in the World Cup qualifying, which was just one of, if not the most embarrassing World Cup qualifying I've ever seen the U.S. been in, and missing out on the World Cup. That it's definitely going to be more important that this time. Let's just hope we don't miss a chance to potentially make it to the World Cup, and it will just be an absolute disaster for this national team if they're going to miss the World Cup for the second consecutive time. Like, one time was already a disaster. Imagine if they missed it for the second time, and there's going to be some real question that once again this soccer federation is going to have to ask. But there you have it. That is pretty much it for all the news that has happened in these past couple of days. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of all these news, and if there's some news that I didn't mention on this board, let me know in the comments below. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.